Well, thank you very much for inviting me to this occasion, which marks the Africa Day. Africa Day is a very important event in the life of all Africans at home, on the continent, and in the diaspora. It's a poignant reminder of the long struggle by African peoples through the transatlantic slave trade, the Arab slave trade, the European expansion into Africa generally, formal colonization, the division of Africa in 1884 in Berlin Congress, colonization itself, neocolonialism, which is a reality today, and the extent to which Africa remains at the bottom of the international division of labor. Sadly, Africa Day is also a reminder of the failures of the post-colonial period. Because when the African struggle formally was started through the launch of the Pan-African movement in Manchester, right through to the formation of the OAU in 1963. The dream was not only of unity, important as that is, the dream was of free Africa, which through its freedom, independence, could then steer towards an economic community. So even when Ghana became independent in 1957, the legend of the Pan-Africanism, Kwame Nkrumah, made the point very clear that Africa is not free until every bit of its land is freed from colonialism. And so it was that the OAU set up the Liberation Committee to help steer the struggle for independence and liberation in Southern Africa. And yes, the liberation of Zimbabwe in 1980 brought that dream closer, even though, as the Lagos Plan of Action in 1978 demonstrated, Africa was already lamenting its recent past, the post-colonial period. And therefore the Lagos Plan of Action of 1978 was an attempt to revitalize the goal of African economic liberation. So Zimbabwe becomes independent soon after the Lagos Plan of Action. So it was a very grand occasion, not only for Zimbabwe but for Africa as a whole. And likewise, as you know, 1st of April 1980, SADC was inaugurated as SADCC. And about the same time, the PTA was formed, the Provisional Trade Agreement of Africa. So 1980 was a very important date and marked the beginning of the end of apartheid, beginning of the end of apartheid in Namibia. And witnessing, as some of us did, the independence of Namibia in 1990, and later on, what South Africans call the arrival of democracy in 1994. One would have thought we were halfway to the dream of African unity, to the dream of African unity based on regional integration in the various blocks of Africa, SADC, Southern Africa, ECOWAS, West Africa, IGAD, the Horn of Africa, East African Community in East Africa, and the Maghreb in North Africa, and another one in Central Africa. The idea behind this, as the Abuja Treaty pointed out in 1993, the idea was now that the regional blocks become the building blocks towards an African economic community by 2026. Well, we're in 2021. We are very far from the idea of an African economic community. So, makes Africa Day in 2021 an occasion both to remember the long journey that Africa and Africans and people of African descent have walked, have traversed over the last 400 years or more. But also to remind us of the enormous task that lies ahead and how to overcome the three major obstacles or constraints to regional integration and continental integration. The first being the history of Africa's integration into the international community, an integrative process which has been negative for Africa and Africans, and that it has meant that we remain the suppliers of raw materials. The very reasons why we're colonized, Africa was colonized, the very reason why Africa lost more than 10 million of its able-bodied persons through slavery. And today we continue to do what Rhodes said in 1858, that we as Englishmen, we must become colonialists, must become imperialists. We need colonies to supply us the raw materials so we can feed our factories, keep our people working, so they don't revert to revolution. And we need colonies for us to sell our finished products from our factories. Sadly, in this century, Africa is doing precisely that, supplying raw materials at the cost of employment at home. Unemployment is rife across the continent because we are selling our raw materials, which could be feeding our own factories. We are caught in a historical bind, an economic bind, as suppliers of raw materials. It's a curse. The richest continent in terms of raw materials, and yet the poorest. Its resources, enormous resources. Francis Kujanga, a Zimbabwean professor of metallurgy, has done a book recently called Minerals in Africa. And he talks about 70 minerals, key minerals, without which the world would not develop out there. But all of these, Africa has little or nothing to show as a benefit to it. We are in a bind. And therefore the challenge of breaking out of this historical legacy of vertical integration, negative integration to the north, is serious. The second major constraint to regional integration and continental integration is the legacy of uneven and unequal development between our countries and within our countries. It's a legacy of underdevelopment. And the third, and equally onerous is the legacy of the African state. The African state has proved to be a very strange animal. As Samir Amin describes it, this is an importation, an imitation of the developed states of the North, but it's a wasteful state. It's corrupt, it's useless. It is incapable of reform, it's stuck. It's produced a new class, the comprador bourgeoisie, a class of people inside the state and outside the state who don't work. We have made millions through stealing, pure and simple, through pillaging, looting. We had a conference here a few months ago on the political economy of looting of natural resources. This is the legacy that is left us, those of us who claim to have the richest of natural resources. We're a disaster. We speak in Zimbabwe of $15 billion worth of diamonds money gone. When my friend came here, Peter Nyang, a few years ago to give the Pan-African lecture at Sapest, he was shocked to find when he arrived at Harare airport that there were no cranes across Harare. He thought the 15 billion would be here. The point is that billion is gone out there. This is the nature of the state that we have. And with that African state, the way it is, the post-colonial state, it is hardly possible for a transformative process that can convert and transform our countries into industrial zones based on the resources that we have, that can offer hope to the younger generation, many of whom have never known at 30, 40 what work is all about. We have all hours. I was out in Mazoe Valley last week, and you've seen the ecological disaster that's there, Makorokoza. You have not seen anything like that. And I'm told Rishavani and many other parts of Zimbabwe are likewise completely destroyed by the new craze for gold. And the powers that be appear to have no moral authority to restrain and constrain the devastation that's taking place. Because invariably, many of them in the top echelon are the ones, are the gold barons themselves, who buy with the monies that they easily get, foreign currency, buy the gold at low prices from these Makorokos. So we have a very much to lament about, and as Peter Nyang said in his lecture here, if we have to start reforming the state, the African state, perhaps we should begin with the abolition of the executive presidency. I think in Zimbabwe, given what's going on now, all these amendments, all designed to create an imperial presidency, we're actually going backwards when we should be fighting not only to limit the powers of executive presidency, which was the purpose of the 2013 constitution. We should move towards the abolition of the executive presidency. And I agree with Peter Nyang that should be the start. Whether that is feasible in our lifetime, I'll leave that to the younger generation to understand that perhaps the kind of reform, the revolution we are looking for, should begin first and foremost with the reform of the African state, with the removal of executive presidency, with the move towards a truly democratic dispensation, where the separation of powers, an accountable executive, a vibrant legislature, and a fiercely independent judiciary. These are the pillars of democratic and a developmental state. A developmental state which can only be the basis for the reform and transformation of Africa towards the goal of an African economic community, the goal of an African union. Thank you very much.